has become, starting off a very low-key individual, has now become what I've said in the Sun-Times as sort of a leader of conservatives in Illinois, conservative Republicans and Democrats. He is a state senator who decided to challenge the incumbent governor when it was thought the governor was going to run. He stayed in the race. Even in the endorsement of Corinne Wood, the Chicago Tribune pointed out that this is a man of principle. This is a man who stands on what he believes and is not likely to change. It is so rare in our public policy formulations today to see someone who says clearly what he means and is unchangeable and unswerving on certain basic, consistent articles of principle. So I give you, without further ado, a man who is a state senator who is running as a challenger for the Republican nomination for governor. Stranger things have happened, and strange things may happen. I tell you, incipiently, he is the next governor of Illinois.
Thank you all. Tom, you're always a tough act to follow, but I'll tell you, at the Chicago Conservative Conference, you had the place on fire, and I didn't know what I'd do the next morning to try and compete with you. So your remarks were briefer today, so I'll do my best to match you and even possibly exceed you. I'll work on that a little bit. But I am always pleased to be in your company. You are, as Paul Green said, we're probably there at the wigwam. I only wish I was to have seen it in person and to see what took place, because it really is the beginning, frankly, of the success of the Republican Party around this country. Without what took place at the wigwam and the elevation of Lincoln, none of that would have happened. And you know, that came into being at a time when this country was desperately looking for a way to restore itself to the principles upon which our nation was founded. That was the beginning of the Republican Party. It wasn't there at the beginning as an organized party. In fact, there weren't organized parties at all to begin with. But the Republican Party came along as a renewal of American principles and ideals. So it's interesting that we find ourselves back here in Illinois, where the wigwam was located in the city of Chicago, at a time when we were selecting then the future president of the United States, the first Republican president of the United States, a party grounded heavily in the principles which I will spend some time talking about this afternoon. But here we are in 2002, engaged in a great struggle within our own Republican Party within the state of Illinois. And it is indeed a battle for the heart and soul of the Republican Party. For me, I came to this party after witnessing events in the 1970s, not sure what I wanted to do or be associated with as a party. But in the early 70s, things took place, and eventually in 1976, there was another great struggle within the Republican Party, and at the time, there was the incumbent president who was seeking the opportunity for the first time to be elected, and a not-so-young challenger named Ronald Reagan had come forward and offered his credentials and his possibilities for the Republican Party. And I must tell you that as a member of the generation at that time who was thinking about what the future would be like and what I wanted to be associated with, he captured my imagination. And of course, I was disappointed, as I think a lot of people were in 1976, that this man did not have the opportunity to be the nominee of the Republican Party. But that's the way it was. And of course, he didn't give up. He just kept going. 4 years later, he was the nominee of the Republican Party. And the Republican Party had a renaissance. And that renaissance continued for Certainly the 8 years that he served in office as the President of the United States, and I would contend, I would offer, and I would argue vociferously that the 90s and the economic boom that this country enjoyed was a direct result of that renaissance within the Republican Party. So I have put my name forward as a prospective nominee of the Republican Party on June 11th. You're right, Tom, at a time when the governor of the state of Illinois had not made up his mind as to what it was he was going to do. And I was asked on that day, are you running, even if he does? And I said, I am certainly running, but I did not want to get caught saying in any way, shape, or form that if he was running, I'd be even more vociferous about running. I just wanted to make it clear that I was running, period. But I can tell you today that had he been a person who would have put his name forward, the energy and enthusiasm I would have had for this campaign would only have been the greater. And believe me, my enthusiasm is great today. My vision of our Republican Party is frankly what our founding fathers had as a vision for our great nation. You know, we talk about being a party of principle, and I want to talk about those principles because it's important for you to understand how I define them. We're a party that says we believe in limited government, minimizing the tax burden, promoting personal responsibility, protecting and defending in every way we possibly can the freedoms that we enjoy, relying on and encouraging the free enterprise system to provide the jobs and economic opportunity that will drive our economy into the future. And last but not least, and certainly foremost, making the families of America, making the families of Illinois, making all families stronger, more vibrant, more self-reliant, and more independent. Now, Tom, you touched on the Chicago Tribune editorial, which of course broke yesterday. I've got a copy of it somehow on Saturday. I don't know how Mr. Mayor Poloquin got it, but I was happy to get it ahead of time. And I was somewhat joyed by it. And I'll tell you why. No, they didn't endorse Pat O'Malley officially, but maybe they did unofficially, because what they said was that a party nominee, if it were Pat O'Malley, may not be able to win in November. But they acknowledged something. They acknowledged that my campaign was founded on and principled. In fact, I'll be very literal to be fair with them. O'Malley has run an impressive, forceful campaign. He has provided straight, frank answers, and we commend him for that. He is the most conservative in the race. O'Malley has taken principled positions. Interestingly enough, though, the three that they focused on are the toughest ones to deal with the Chicago Tribune: gun control, capital punishment, and abortion. And while they don't agree with my positions, they did acknowledge that they were principled. And isn't it interesting that they could do that? Because that was not easy. That's a great shift for them to even acknowledge that somebody who would take a position opposite them might be able to argue their side of the public policy debate in a principled fashion. And that is what has happened in this campaign. And that's very important for the future of Illinois. Tom touched on the fact that I'm somewhat, I don't know, did you say soft-spoken, Tom? It depends what room you're in. You know, my granddaughter doesn't think I'm soft-spoken. You know, I get near a microphone, boy, she runs, she leaves the room. I'm somewhat soft-spoken today, and it's certainly the venue. But you know what? If this campaign in the Republican primary is about who can win in November, what have we really accomplished as Republicans? If that's all we're looking for, we can go out and get, just, you know, size them up, decide he or she shall be, put the appropriate labels on them, take them to the electorate and say, okay, here you go. It's not really a Republican, but it's who can win. That's not what the Republican Party is supposed to be about. And frankly, any time that the Republican Party has done great things, that's never been what it's about. And more importantly, is that the path to victory in 2002? I submit to you it is not. I submit to you that the corruption, the insider dealing, the offensive behavior, the failing to stand on principles, the failure to keep campaign pledges, essential campaign pledges, and not to give any explanation whatsoever as to why those pledges were broken, has put Lincoln's grand old party in desperate shape in the 2002 election year. The only path to victory in November is standing on our principles, the principles that Lincoln and Reagan enunciated so well, and they are only being enunciated in this primary election time and again by Pat O'Malley. This is a watershed year. This is an opportunity for Republicans in the state of Illinois to stand up and say, we're going to make a difference. We are not going to be business as usual. Think of the three choices that we have. The frontrunner, the presumptive frontrunner, indeed the person who thought that he would be guaranteed the nomination of the Republican Party, handed it to him, is a person who stands for business as usual. When challenged time and again to explain his positions on issues, he's been unable to even articulate them. And I don't say that to be unkind. I think Jim is a nice man. I think he comes from a nice family. But the bottom line is this. If you look at the man's record as Attorney General of the state of Illinois, his failure to root out public corruption, having made a campaign pledge in 1993 and 1994 that he would, his failure to do anything with respect to challenging a lot of wrongdoing, frankly, that has been going on in charitable giving and receivers of charitable giving in our state, really draws into question whether or not he is fit to serve in the office of governor. And I say he is not. The other candidate in this race is a person who has a very different view of what the Republican Party shall be in the future. Her view, as best I can express it, is that it's something like what was described by George Ryan when he delivered his remarks in Kankakee in August announcing that he would not run for re-election again. Well, let me say this to you. That is not the party of Lincoln and Reagan and the principles upon which our nation is founded and which this party renewed when it came into existence. And then you have my candidacy, which is firmly grounded in the principles of the Republican Party, and not to be in any way, shape, or form stubborn about those principles, but to be grounded in those principles, because those principles, if we embrace them, guarantee the continued existence of our nation. You know, when I meet people who have recently come to America, I ask them oftentimes, every time I can when I can be polite in the process of doing it, why did you come to America? And the answer invariably is, sometimes said in different words, but can be interpreted every time this way, for freedom and opportunity. The Republican Party is the party of freedom and opportunity. We're the only party that offers it. We therefore should be the party not only of American renewal of principles, but we certainly should be the party that every immigrant who comes to America embraces and wants to be part of. And it will be my responsibility as the governor of the state of Illinois to carry that message not only in Illinois, within Republican circles, but around the state and around the nation, to make sure that every Republican is challenged to think about opening up our party for those people who are not feeling comfortable to come in and be part of it today. Now let's talk a little bit about poll numbers, because it's 2 weeks from now, and we'll be getting grades on that day from the good people who choose to enter the Republican primary and take a Republican ballot. Where are they looking at? I'm just going to deal with poll numbers of likely Republican primary voters, those people who have voted at least twice recently. On the right track, wrong track, we've literally inverted from being 30 right track, we were 50 right track not even 2 months ago, and 30 wrong track, and those numbers are now inverted today. What has taken place? Well, I think people are looking for a change. Certainly September 11th came along. Certainly the fiscal woes of the state of Illinois have come to the surface, which are not new to those of us who serve in the General Assembly, especially in the Senate Republican caucus, where we've been fighting vigorously to get our fiscal affairs in order for years now. But sometime around spring of 2000, the present governor decided to start spending more money than we were taking in. And you don't have to be anybody else other than somebody who's a mother or father managing a household account to understand that that is that's an indicator of poor things to come fiscally. Now, where's Jim Ryan in this race? Despite spending heavily on media buys, he finds himself now in the low 40s, and the support that he has is at best to be described soft. You know, when you rate the voters in these polls, they actually say, well, how strong is your feeling? Are you a 5, being real strong, or are you a 1, very weak? And what's taken place for Jim over the last few weeks has been his 5s have gone to 4s, his 4s to 3s, his 3s to 2s, his 2s to 1s, and guess what happens with the 1s? They become undecided. And if you don't believe that, if you don't trust those numbers, let me share this with you. Just observe his television ads. All of a sudden, the presumptive nominee is running negative television spots. And by the way, my last campaign for the state senate was an interesting one. I was the #1 target. And our chief of staff down in Springfield, he said, you know, Pat, how are they going to come at you? And I said, you know, I really don't know how they're going to come at me, but I know one thing, paper doesn't refuse ink. Well, let me tell you something. They're coming at me now, even though I'm not the presumptive nominee. I'm second in most polling that has been done to date, and a solid second. But he is filling the airwaves now with things that are said about me that frankly are misleading and untrue. But that's okay. That's part of politics. And if you're going to be in this game, you come to accept that. What people in the state are looking for, ladies and gentlemen, is for something other than Jim Ryan. And the challenge that I face and we face who want to reform the Republican Party is to find a way to get the message to them that there is an alternative that talks about freedom and opportunity and means it, an alternative that cares about the principles upon which the Republican Party was found, and indeed is willing to take principled positions. Let me share a couple stories with you. The last time I was here at City Club, Tom, it's better to be up here to answer questions, to ask a question, because you get a very limited opportunity to ask a question. But I did ask a question, as you recall, and so did some other people. And one of the persons who had asked a question, I'm not sure that he is here, but we met in the vestibule outside, and we were waiting for the opportunity to catch up with our cars and leave for whatever our next appointments were. And I recognized who he was, and I said, well, did you get an answer to your question? And he said, you know I didn't get an answer to my question. And he said to me, and his question was the one that was directed on the subject of abortion. And he said to me, he said, one thing I can say to you, he says, you and I don't agree on the issue, but at least I know where you stand on the issue. But he went a little further, because I responded to him. I said, you know, Ronald Reagan was a lot like that, wasn't he? And then he said to me, he said, you know, I tell all my liberal Democrat friends, Paul, you'll probably mention this to you if he's meant that. Paul.
Hardly if that's the description, but go ahead.
He says, I often mention to my liberal Democrat friends that I voted for Ronald Reagan not once but twice, and if he was still running for President of the United States today, I'd still be voting for him. I think that says a lot about Ronald Reagan. And the idea of saying what you mean and meaning what you say. Then I want to share a story with you. On Saturday, Mary Judith and I separately found our way down to Madison County for the Lincoln Day dinner there and a couple of functions beforehand. And we got to go home together. Made it home like about 3 in the morning there, but we made it home. And that was the first night we had this bad storm. So we figured out a way. We couldn't fly, so we figured out a way to get there anyway. But we're really the only ones who showed up, at least running for governor, to their Lincoln Day dinner. And as a result, got invited to sit up in the dais. I don't always get to sit up there, you know. So, but I did this time because I was the only one who showed up. And the person who invited me, interestingly enough, was the one who's running Mr. Ryan's campaign in Madison County. By the way, he invited me up to make remarks and forgot to tell me that I should be brief. So I had a nice opportunity to express myself, and wonderful, wonderful reaction. I got 2 stories to share with you from that evening. First of all, when I was done, there was only one table in the room that did not stand up and cheer as we left, because we talked about our message of principle in action and our record of doing that. And I stayed to the end of the dinner, and I can't tell you how many people walked up to me and said, I want your sign, because we were standing, I was greeting people as they were leaving, thanking them for being there, and they wanted my sign so they could pull out Mr. Ryan's sign. Now, I mean, the number of them was truly remarkable. And now, part of that is because I showed up and he didn't, okay? And the other part of it was my remarks, that they're looking for somebody who says something that they're looking for. But here's the most interesting one. One of the women there came up to me and she said, let me tell you something. I can't tell you the county. She swore me to secrecy because as I described to you who this is, whatever, they don't want to expose him, whatever. But a downstate county Democrat who is a former sheriff in that county, and it isn't in Madison County, it's in a neighboring county, has a Pat O'Malley sign in their front lawn. And so does his mother-in-law, who worked for a local newspaper down there for many years and is a very active person in the Democrat Party. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that I'm really a Democrat running for Republican. That's Corinne's job. But but what I do suggest to you is this, that for the Tribune to come to the conclusion that I cannot win in November is just ludicrous. I mean, that's to suggest that Ronald Reagan couldn't win in 1980. And by the way, you might remember that a lot of people predicted that he couldn't win in 1980, that he just had a message that could not win. Well, I'm here to tell you that not only could Ronald Reagan win in Illinois, but Pat O'Malley can win in Illinois, and he will win on the northwest and southwest sides of Chicago, and people will be truly, remarkably amazed. And by the way, he will win downstate. And he will win in DuPage County. And he will win in Lake County and McHenry County and Will County. Now, I have to talk about my undistinguished career in the General Assembly You might remember that there's a columnist, not you, Tom, but one of your co-columnists in the Sun-Times talked about my undistinguished career. I'm just going to give a few brief highlights. Vice Chairman of the Senate Education Committee for all the time that I've served. I have been the leader in giving people in this state the opportunity for a better education. I'm the sponsor of the 1995 Chicago School Reform legislation. I mean, this is landmark legislation. It's heralded all over the country. Now, I don't want to say something like this, but some people might say, if that's all he ever got done in the 9 years he served, he unleashed a lot of power in good governance and educational opportunity in the state of Illinois. Charter schools. Now, one of my opponents in this race, it's interesting, he's always talking about charter schools. It's his version of choice. Well, I'm the sponsor of that legislation. And I'm glad to see some of my homeschooler friends are here today, and I think they deserve a big round of applause because there are no more courageous, dedicated Americans in this country than mothers and fathers willing to do just that, to teach their own children. They are to be commended, respected, and appreciated for what they do. Now, it has been rumored that Pat O'Malley is a tax and spender, by that same columnist, by the way. Pat O'Malley took on a 3-year battle when I arrived in the General Assembly to repeal something called the retail rate law. And none other than Jim Edgar, when he signed that repealer, which became so popular, it was so red hot by the time we got it done, admitted when he signed the bill that we saved Illinois taxpayers $13 billion. By the way, I co-sponsored property tax caps. So I don't know where that commentator got his information, but he needs to brush up a little bit. But the only tax refund program in the history of the state of Illinois returning over $250 million to Illinois families was sponsored by Pat O'Malley. Now, with respect to health care and seniors, I am a member of the Loyola University Health System Board of Trustees. I have been named Legislator of the Year by the Suburban Area Agency on Aging. And if that is not enough, I sponsored the expansion of the circuit breaker program to help 500,000 senior and disabled citizens on a targeted basis. One of the smartest things that's been done, and frankly, because of that legislation, Illinois is a recipient of additional resources from the federal government this year to help us even go further because Illinois is so far in front because of the expansion of the circuit breaker program. Now, as far as business goes, not only do I have a business background, I've been in business one way or the other since I was 19 years old. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Purdue University in economics and finance, respectively, and a law degree from the John Marshall Law School. And I also have a 100% rating from the National Federation of Independent Business, the absolutely 100% rating in the time that I have served in the General Assembly, and they don't even have to come and talk to me. Why? Because I understand that small businesses are the backbone of Illinois' economy and the key to growing our economy into the future. So every time I can stand up for them, I have, and I've done it with great relish and enthusiasm. Now, public safety is on everybody's mind. I won't get into the details as to all the things that I have done, but in my undistinguished career, the Illinois State Crime Commission, none the less than the Illinois State Crime Commission, named me in 2000 Legislator of the Year for my efforts in making communities safer and families in our state safer. What are we going to do beyond this what are the most important things we need to do as a state? And what does the next governor of the state of Illinois need to focus on? Clearly, fiscal affairs of the state are on the minds of the people. And so we need real leadership in this area. One of my opponents in this race, and listen carefully to what he says. I don't know whether he's going to give up talking about these things, but every time he's asked a tough question, he talks about forming a commission to study the issue. And that's not leadership. I mean, it's not just a matter of not having an answer. It's, wait a minute, the governor of the state of Illinois is supposed to step up and do something. I thought the General Assembly, that's why we elected them in the first place, to be, that incubator of ideas that are brought together and to work together in committees and in task force to come up with good, solid programs. But the governor is supposed to lead. He's supposed to put forward plans and ideas. So as governor of the state of Illinois, I'll assure you I'll do that. And let me give you some ideas on fiscal restraint. First of all, we need honest budgeting, straightforward budgeting, year to year, zero base, so everybody knows what's going on. And there should not be an assumption anymore that because some department in government got X dollars last year, they get X plus a percentage. We need to get our fiscal house in order in that respect. I supported 5% across the board cuts. We did that in the Senate. We voted for that twice since these fiscal affairs surfaced, and now they're very public. And, my idea isn't necessarily, it's not necessarily you have to cut out jobs. You got to cut out waste. And you know what? It's not hard to find a waste. As I'm going around the state of Illinois, guess what I do? I talk to state employees. You know what? They're taxpayers, they work hard, and they want to be associated with something that they can be proud of. And you know what? When they are going to work every day and they see the waste, it disgusts them. And their jobs are at risk if they open their mouth. Well, they will not have their jobs at risk with Pat O'Malley as governor of the state of Illinois, and I'll be looking forward. I will be looking forward to their advice. I want them to show me where the waste is because they know where it is. They see it every day. We're going to root it out, get it out, and we'll have real limited government in Illinois. And by the way, we have offered specific areas where we can save money. The Department of Corrections is one. We have been informed that since the current governor took office, the number of administrative offices, Bob, help me, what do they call these people again? They may have to make up names. They're deputy directors and directors. We've gone from 5 to over 30. You know what that means? That means we had patronage employees that needed to be hired. And what does one of my opponents offer to solve this? An early retirement package. You know what that's called? A golden parachute. Well, I got news for you. There'll be no golden parachutes under a Pat O'Malley administration as governor of the state of Illinois. And I've talked about something else that I think is really important. We need a balance sheet in the state of Illinois so that every year, every taxpayer, every voter, every citizen can look at a consolidated balance sheet of the state's affairs and know what their government did using consistent rules from year to year to year. I look at my banker friend over there since I was a young man, and he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Every other government in Illinois publishes one. Try and find one on state government. You'll be shocked. It's so convoluted. I mean, I've been there 9 years and have not been able to get it all in a box where it's easy to evaluate. And when government is impossible to evaluate financially, guess what? You get no accountability. That is going to change. We will have a balance sheet, and you will be proud to know what your government is doing from year to year. Now, I'm gonna ask you to help me with something. Tom, I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I'll move it along here. I have a bill in this session. It's called Senate Bill 1800. Its time has come. This is something Senator Fitzgerald and I worked on, but it's an even better version than the legislation that he and I worked on. It calls for taking the 9 operating casino licenses that are out there, that after all is said and done, net to the people who operate them over $1 billion. Now, I'm a capitalist, okay? I hope we're all capitalists in this room. It's part of being an American. But these contrived licenses that are directed at a few people, all insiders, is not free enterprise. It's not capitalism. What we need to do is make them pay what those are worth. And I am told from people on Wall Street that they're worth about $16 billion conservatively. Well, let me tell you something. Senate Bill 1800 says we are going to have, over a 3-year period of time, the auctioning off of those licenses, and whatever money is generated will go into a fund. And that fund will be used to do, among other things, these things. Number 1, pay off the Illinois First tax. $6 billion. Number 2, coincident with it, we will repeal every tax and fee increase that came with Illinois First debt that is being collected. Third, we will set aside $3 billion to work on, by the way, this is another one of the programs that Pat O'Malley worked on and has made law here in Illinois, the School Construction Grant Program. You know, this is one of the things we really can do to help education around the state. You know what we're doing with that money? We're taking that money and we're taking our schools from, 19th century facilities and putting them in 21st century facilities with the technology that is necessary to prepare our kids and give them the opportunities they're going to need into the future. And you know what's left over after all that? $7 billion. And you know what $7 billion is? It's bigger than Illinois First was in the first place. And you know what we can do with that kind of money? We can leverage it, just like they did with the Illinois First debt, to get well more than $10 billion. Well more, arguably at least double the number $7 billion. You know what you can do? You've already got a way then to build the starter airport at Peatone, $500 million. And that one's behind us now, without going into debt and without hitting taxpayers in this state. We can build the interconnection between 294 and 57, the only interchange system in this part of the country, and one of only 2 in the entire country that do not actually connect to each other. And we could go on and on. I mean, the 355 extension, the 53 extension, the Western Highway that has been promised in the western part of this state since going back to the Thompson era and is not completed yet. These are the kind of things we can do, and we can do them smart, and they're Republican ideas. It's simply, it sounds too good to be true, and guess what? It is true. So I call on you to speak with whomever you wish to get Senate Bill 1800 out of the Rules Committee, where it has been stuck. And guess why? Because the people who will lose their licenses or have to pay a fair price for them, okay, don't want it out. We need to do something about that. Education, quickly. Local control, local control, local control. Local control with the families that are here and families across Illinois so that they can direct the education of their children. We need to do something about competition, therefore. And you know what? The best example we can have in this state of how competition works in education is to look at our higher education system. It's truly remarkable what we're doing in this state. And we have, as a result of it, arguably the finest higher education system in the nation. Well, we could use a little competition at the elementary and secondary level, and guess what? We will have, using local control and competition, the finest elementary and secondary education system in the nation as well. Transportation. We cannot, under any circumstances, allow our position as a state, #1 transportation state in the Union, to be depreciated. I think that Corrine did well with the Chicago Tribune because she embraced absolutely, without any question, whatever Mayor Daley wants to do with the airport proposal at O'Hare. That bought it. Well, I got news for you. It's the wrong thing to do. You destroy communities, ways of life, and in the process, under what they are proposing, and the tax bases that have been worked and built up over many years. And the cavalier attitude people have towards these people is just inappropriate and wrong. Now, Tom, I know you're going to want me to move along here. We're going to run out of time, but let me say this. My campaign is about strengthening Illinois families and cleaning up state government. The corruption that pervades our government and oozes out of it needs to go. We need to chart a new course for the state of Illinois and to return to the values and ethic that made our state great and can do it again. And the only way the future generations of our Illinois citizens will have the same opportunities I have had to build a quality of life will be to have stronger families in this state, and I'll be committed to that. And let's think about this. History has always been changed by a committed few. Now, you know what? They've either changed it for the good or the bad. We have to think about that. Do Republicans in Illinois want to change for the better? Is it best to have second best? Is it best to compromise our principles and hope we get somebody elected? Well, I say no. And I need the support of every good Republican and Democrat who wants to come in the Republican primary, and independent as well. I need their help on March 19th. Let this be the day that the people of the state of Illinois, and especially Republicans, said no to corruption and broken promises, and yes to principled Republican leadership committed to cleaning up state government and restoring the goodwill of the Republican Party. Thank you, God bless you, and I look forward to answering any questions you have.